Thank you, Hannah. Again, no pressure, I guess. Well, today I'm going to talk about Conway's law and Gen AI. And Hannah asked me, do you want to submit a talk? And I was like, oh, that looks like an interesting thing. Now, a couple of weeks later, I'm not sure if that was the right title, but we'll figure it out. So I'm also kind of trying to avoid any technology. I'm a nerd, so kind of like I get excited about that stuff. But I also want to have it explained in a way everybody can understand. And I tried my best to keep it at the level that is applicable for everybody, wherever you are in the organization. So why this picture? I've had this multiple times. You walk around in a park or somewhere, and you see these people, and they're just so much similar to whatever pet they have. I choose a dog. Maybe you're a cat person. It doesn't matter. But kind of the hair is similar, the clothing, the look alike. They're almost like walk alike, like straight up or not, like that kind of thing. So in the tech world, there is something called Conway's law, and it is a similar thing like the similarities between what the man and the dog are. In this case, in the software, the dog is the software because we nerds love our dogs, right? But it also applies to an organizational level. And I posted this on LinkedIn, and people guess what's the link, and somebody guessed it. I don't know if that person's here. Congratulations, you guessed it right. So instead of just only the man and the dog, the person and the pet, or the product, I would say, this also applies into an organization. An organization that is very structured, hierarchical, they can only produce certain products because for them, that team is going to work on that part. The other team is going to work on that part, and then we'll all come together. So the way the company is organized actually influences the kind of the product, how it gets created. And so not every company can create the same products, because if you're very loosely organized, then you have more freedom. Maybe there's more creativity. If it's very hierarchical, maybe it's very constrained. And that's kind of Conway's law. That's all you need to know, right? I'm not going to go deeper into that. So my name's Patrick Dubois. I don't know what my title is anymore. I'm somewhere in between a product person, an engineer. I know, I keep having that problem. But I am interested from very early on in new tech ways. I started on when the internet was not yet like completely a thing, mobile, cloud, all the stuff. Anyway, so I've surfed a few of those waves, and I really like the chaos of the first waves. That's where I shine, that's where I make sense, and that's also for me where the learning is, right? The impact of this technology on us humans, mobile phone, it was already mentioned, big impact, cloud, big impact, all those things. The way that I try to do it is not by kind of sitting in my chair and doing philosophy, and it's like, oh, this is really cool. So I like to do this hands-on because I always tell that I'm a method actor. I need to kind of experience why this is changing me and kind of going from there. I'm focusing particularly these days on engineering with AI in all the forums, but it's less a big deal for this talk. Although, of course, part of the talk is how do organizations kind of are impacted by AI or not by AI. So this is my garden, right? I have a lawnmower which created all these tracks. And then my kid said, this is what it reminds me about, right? This talk is about what's there now, right? What do we experience today? And there's a lot of opinions on in the future. I have no clue whether that's right or wrong, but I surface people who have opinions, and I describe why they think this, and then I hope you fill in the blanks. I'm not going to set you up with an opinion. I'm always try to be a little bit neutral, and unless I've experienced it, I'm not like that forte, but there's people smarter than me going into that field. So we got new technology, right? And it's amazing because it actually kind of talks back to us. And new technology, I don't know if you're on LinkedIn, but this is pretty much a reality. Because it's so new, everybody can be the expert in the room, which is great, right? Obviously, they come with a lot of backgrounds that kind of help understand that thing. Hey, I'm a designer, but now I'm a Gen AI designer. And it's just, it's pretty cool, right? So there's a certain thing of that. All the products, they're a little bit like this. Oh, let's do AI. And we heard this morning, of course, it needs to bring the value. Well, maybe sometimes that brings the value you want, but I'm not sure. One of the bigger questions that initially when a new technology comes in is where does it land in the organization? Who gets to have the new shiny thing? And there's been a little bit of a battle in the software world, like, is it the data folks who get it? Like, because they're closest to machine learning. Hey, this is all about integration and kind of cobbling and getting close to production. So the apps want it, and then this platform team. So there's a little bit of a turf war going on in an organization. And this is for technology, but I'm sure whatever your organization, if you're a sales organization, I'm the one who will do kind of the AI. I will spearhead the AI. So everybody's kind of like spurring to be there. What I've learned over the years is in an org, there's usually the one team that bootstraps it. There's the incubators, they start, they learn, they're the one who kind of draw the initial straw, let's get going. And then as companies try to move on, they want to repeat the pattern beyond the one team. And then eventually, they want to scale this out to all the teams. I think this is the case with AI. Maybe that one team, that one group is doing it, but we'll see that everybody will be impacted with AI. And because then when everybody's impacted with AI, maybe it makes sense to kind of join the common pieces into an organization, which in technology world we call the platform team, where everybody can build on top of. It doesn't always have to be in the technology teams. I'm seeing the same thing in product. I think it was Amazon who initially had their whole product line and all the different teams doing Gen AI. They wanted to be first. And all of a sudden they said like, hey, hang on, we want to have a consistent user experience across our products. Let's align that. That was not even technology, that was getting the product across consistently. So there's another model called the unfixed model, where there's a crew that is the experience crew. They make sure that your AI experience that you're having with the product is a good thing. We saw the Vodafone one. I don't know if that's the good one, but it is a thing about the experiences that the people have. But this talk is actually more on the reverse, Conway. It's also something. So people changing their dogs, changing their software, changing how the components work, more modular or not, influences how the organization will look like. Because to do well with these kind of way of managing your technology, you need to be set up for success in your organizations. This is one way of explaining a reorg, right? You just say, well, we need to do this. All of a sudden, let's scratch, like let's rewrite the organization, and that's sometimes referred to as the reverse Conway. And so this talk is about, if we're all building AI, how are we influenced in setting us up for success in the organization? This was mentioned a few times. The copilot system, right? Something that helps us somewhere on the side. We've all experienced that, whether that's ChatGPT, your sales copilot, or your coding copilot. It is a pattern that is very dominant. But what you see is that the more you rely on this technology, the more you actually become the reviewer of the task. You almost become the manager. You say, this is good, this is wrong, this is what I want, this is not what I want. Maybe you don't have the depth anymore, right, to decide what is good and bad, because it's the first glance and you have to decide. You become a manager. You become a reviewer more and more. So that's definitely something that is happening today with these tools helping us and going on. It's been mentioned multiple times by companies. People experiences this. But we need to kind of talk about the elephant in the room, because if that just continues, okay, are we still hiring humans? Because, people have crazy ideas about like this technology taking a piece of our job and just expanding into everything we do. I found this model by Sanjeet, great visualization of how our jobs could be changing. So the way he describes it is a job is a bunch of tasks. Some are very commodity. Some are very specialized because that's our essence of being. We're very good at blah, and that's why people hire us. And so when technology comes in, it can have a few effects. It could boost that thing that we are so great at, or it could also say, well, there's no need for you to do this anymore for this part of the task. The technology is just going to do it for you. So those kind of interactions is a way of visualizing what AI can impact in our lives or the daily things we do. And obviously, if you look at encoding, if you say, well, we're only typing 1% or 5% of the time, of course, AI can do this better. But if you look at all the pieces, that becomes a different story. So he explains this. If the technology is just saying, hey, it's complementary, it's all good, status quo, we're all working, that's fine. We just got a new tool, that's clear. But maybe you are a graphical designer and now you can do things 10 times as fast as all the others. There's a competitive advantage, and we're creating value that I can do this now faster, and so I can charge you the same amount of money, which is cool, right? But as things progress, everybody catches on and becomes a commodity. So everybody can do it. So that competitive advantage kind of dozes off, and it becomes a commodity thing. So that's not anymore my special reason for being here if that's the thing that gets like substituted. Eventually, if the technology is so good at that thing, I'm not even doing it anymore. So that's where it becomes tricky, and that's where we are fearing for our jobs to do that. So I like that build-up of the specific things to do that. So what can we do as a new job? And just throwing this out here. If we're a coder and I write software, maybe my next job is to train the software of the AI, right? I'm not kidding you, but this job's kind of openings start existing. Instead of coding, just train the AI, it does the coding, because then it's a different world, right? So I'm just looking at this as an example, but you can imagine, where do you get like the green box again that's very specific, where you can bring the value? That's kind of the search everybody will do. And what I notice is that this is a roller coaster. One day I think it's like, well, it's good. The other day is like, wow, no, I didn't know it could do this. And every day I'm shaken up to the core while looking at this new technology. And maybe if you're very positive you say like, I have now superpowers, I can do anything. But the next person next to you says, I have superpowers, I can do anything. So it's a little bit tricky, but it gets you through the day not being like pessimistic on the future. So if all these things happen, I want to give that example of, let's say I'm on Amazon and I want to buy a book. Instead of buying the book, there's a bidding going on. And this is a case of two AI, not really, but two agents, two bots, bidding against each other. You see the amount of dollars the book started to cost, right? It's actually a rare thing to find because they tried to scrub this story from the internet. But the funny thing is, one was given like, buy at all costs. The one is like, okay, just reduce or uplift the costs, or the other keeps buying. So you see this explosion of the two things happening. Again, maybe we don't get there, but it will happen, right? And then humans have to step in and make sure we understand what's happening. We have to deal with the situation. So that exception management is definitely, like the management, is something we have to get better at. Maybe the AI also has to help us to be better at this. But a lot of people are focused on, can we make it work? But a lot of our jobs will be deal with the exceptions and get better at the exceptions. I've done my fair share of automation of servers and installing all that stuff. And I found that 20% over the years was spent on the automation, making it repeatable. And all the other ones were about dealing with failures. I need to monitor whether it's failing. I need to design the system that it's not allowed to fail. I need to make sure, like, when I have no clue why it's failing, I can search. I can figure out why it is. And then even up to a point like, well, nothing's failing. Let me train for when there's a failure. It's like the fireman, right? They train just in case the failure happens. It's not that something they're used to all day, but it is something they train for. So that kind of is another way of looking at where we're heading, not just reviewing, but dealing with the failures. Now, this is more, until now, on the personal level. My skills, what can I do? So Henrik Nieberg, I don't know if people know that, but he's known for Spotify model and squats for the tech nerds. What he says is that the way we organize usually teams in our organization is we put people with different skills together. We value the diversity. They have different insights, so we assume that by bringing those people together, we have a better result. It's not one-sided, it's not biased. We bring all those people together. And the same thing is with knowledge. If I'm designing for a front end, a back end, I just put them together. But with AI, this starts to look like that. The AI has lots of knowledge, lots of different things, not just the one thing. So maybe I can get by with only a few humans or a little bit overlapping who know just enough to understand what they need to ask, and they ask it to the AI system. So he reasons that for that reason, the teams will get smaller that way. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but there's something there because we're so empowered, we can do all the things we want that we can do maybe in a way that we don't need that collaboration. So that smaller teams is a few people with some AI helping us to do that job. And then maybe we bring all the small teams together again in one big team. So I don't know what that's going to result into. But you understand if it's all like the smaller things, they need an identity, they need a grouping, they need to share and come back to that. So that's one way of looking at is putting those teams together. This is another picture. It's a little bit hard to read, but you say, just look at the word AI. Everything's got to be AI, right? Like, take your previous job title, put AI in front of it, and something's there with a copilot, something's there to help with knowledge, and go from there. So if I'm a specialist in a certain thing, I might have to worry about, okay, if I'm really deep down in like a very niche thing, am I going to get a job for a sufficiently number of hours? Because it might only be needed for a few hours. So I might want to move more into consultancy across, or even go across teams and kind of help multiple teams, like a roaming person that is helping those people as well. So your role might be different, but then again, if you're debugging all the big issues, your role might shine again, because then you're the expert and nobody else knows. So that kind of compensates a little bit of the loss versus like a new role that we might dive into. So when we have those smaller teams and the AI is kind of helping us to do faster things, we see maybe, people have 3-week sprints, like cycles where they do get work done. Maybe it's 2-week sprints, 2 weeks. Maybe it's a 1 day, because we just asked the AI to work overnight and kind of gather the results, and it's like, oh, well, we got it. Speculation. Never going to say it's the 1 day that we're aiming for, but you see there's a pressure of getting things there faster. I don't know what the new process will be, how we can put all things together. I do know is, from experience, if you release too many features to customers, they get overwhelmed. So there's a limit to the things we can put out. So that's a counterbalancing act in there. So one way you could position yourself is, well, today I'm going to work on that. Tomorrow I'm going to work on that. So we've talked about the people who have multiple skills, and they can thrive in the system because they can move around, or they're complementary to the AI. They know like a lot of fields. But maybe you were also kind of having, I don't care what the domain is. Today I'm working in sales. Tomorrow I'm working in marketing. Tomorrow I'm working in a different field. And I go across. So it's even broader generalization. And it is not, you're not expected to know all this, but there is a continuous learning on, okay, today my job is like this. Tomorrow I'm doing this. And that kind of aspect of learning is going to be interesting. I like this visualization as well. So the copilot is to complement people. So, the pyramid. And, here in the picture, I think they're trying to achieve that. It's helping the mundane tasks in a way that it's helping. And, maybe eventually some of the mundane tasks are autonomously done by the AI, and that's fine, right? So that's kind of one way of looking at it. There's also already a trend of smaller companies getting more money, right? The level of abstraction, you can do faster things faster and faster with fewer people. So that's not just happening through AI, it's just because of all the abstractions and all the technology that we built over the years. So that's kind of a trend that kind of aligns with those things as well. Now, you might think about AI as a technology. I like the way how they phrase it as a cultural technology. Think of Wikipedia. Wikipedia is a technology. It's a website where we put all the things that we describe. But if we rewrite Wikipedia, we're able to rewrite history. Right? So a lot of the models have been trained on our culture, on our flaws, and it mimics also what they return to us. So it's a cultural transmission as a technology. So it's not just, hey, it predicts numbers. There's definitely kind of an ingrained part of a cultural thing. Now, you might have heard the LLM and the agents, but the instrumental paper there was interactive simulacra of human behavior. So what they did is they took the scene of a game, and they gave every person in the game, the agents running like humans, and they gave them identities. And they said, please play out this scenario. Go to the pub, drink a coffee, by lunch, talk to that person. And they recorded all those things. And I really found that it is just mimicking the human behavior because it's so much of that cultural transmission, and you see that kind of happening. So a lot of people got really excited about this because they started to think more about, oh, it's not just complementing us, it is us. It is like us, right? And that's kind of what sparked a lot of ideas. Well, it's that kind of thing, like, yeah, Spot, but if you kind of like look at it differently, it becomes something really nice, something that understands you. And so what people have been trying to do is, all the roles we have in the company, what if we make them agents and we just have them play it out? Like, they can have meetings at like a fraction of the speed. They can have multiple decisions. So I can just run this out as a company in a new way, right? So I'm not saying this will be there tomorrow, but there are people doing this, trying to do this today. So your mileage may vary. And then it becomes like, well, scaling was hiring people. Now scaling is getting more compute. Because the more things I can predict, the faster I can get. That's a different way of operating. into the model of organizational structures. But as it is a mirror of ourselves, we might expect unwanted behavior, even if it's a bunch of zeros and ones. And we talked about agents working together, but they can also influence each other in a bad way. You have one bad actor, one bad agent, and it could screw the whole conversation of all the other agents reaching as a result. So you see, it's almost feeling like humans. It is obviously not, but you see, we need to think about those issues as well, as much as we do in our own org about the agents doing that. And then you think about inclusiveness. This is an experiment in Denmark, and people had to smile before entering the supermarket. So the AI was deciding who gets in, who did not get in. Obviously, this is still a very nice way of saying, they need to smile, so it's not like, you're not permitted. But it shows you kind of like that mirroring effect of this AI. So people are trying to build a code of conduct for AI and saying, you should not do this. You should do it like that. You should always support the people. So it's no different than a conference with a code of conduct, but now it is for the agents. And of course, we don't want to be not nice to the technology, because one day, they might have to take decisions on us. So everybody's like, oh, you shouldn't do this to technology. Hey. But the real point is, will we have in our org chart just the AI at the bottom, or will we allow it to rise to decide when things need to be done? Does any AI will decide whether we're going to get a taxi, we're going to get food, we're going to get like a raise? I don't know. But it is also, then you can say, why even have humans? Right? That's what people are exploring, that sweet spot in between, like, humans just changing, awkward people, not predictable. AI agents, definitely the same. But, we always hope for the best. And similar to that discussion about generalists and specialists, the AI agents are going to have the same discussion. So what are you? Are you a specialist? Okay, you can charge more, but you'll do less work, but you'll get a premium when we hire you. But the commodity is like, okay, you got to work for cheap in that way. And that brings up this. A company trying to introduce digital worker employee records. They want to hire the agent as an employee. This project has been withdrawn. Obvious reasons, but why on earth are people even thinking about this? Putting AI in the org chart, the manager, the lawyer, and then the agent, and they compare each other compared to the number of volume of work they can do. I'm not making this up, by the way. These are all things I found. But it kind of brings that thing on. We're not sure how to deal with this. We can be with kind of how we think about it as equal or not equals and so on. But how do you do performance reviews of agents then? And this wasn't interesting. So you just say, well, if you earn $1,000 this month, it's almost like a salesperson. You're kind of like, you're heading to this kind of quota, and if you're over that, you did a good job and you get extra money. I don't know what you would get as an agent, but suddenly raising the bar. And people have done the experiment. They kind of had a bot. They gave it $50,000 in Bitcoin, and they say, just make money. Please make me money. It was the nichest of things. It came up with a meme, very specific in a community that was willing to spend so much money that ultimately it spawned its own crypto coin, and it just had its own kind of stock market, and it just went up in money. Anyway, it's not the world I want to live in, but again, I'm showing you the spectrum of what people are playing with. And why not experiment on your organization? Well, is Patrick the right person, or maybe we should do the simulation whether Bob is the better person to do the job? Kid you not, a company that's creating a digital twin of your organization, and they take the API data of how all organizations are structured, and they feed this and they run the simulations. So you start wondering who controls who, right? So I don't know if it's not working. Anyway, for those who remember the Chrome browser, that was the pun. But so eventually, wrapping up, okay, we add GPT on the service, or copilot, we automate part of our jobs, we replace people with the job, and then we have to do the work for our customers. But then I found something even more strange. There's a new term called software delivered services, and the way that I would explain this is, there's a whole industry of people making food, and that's all great. But what if everybody has a 3D printer at home that prints food? Will we still have to buy and go to a restaurant, or we could just press the button and have that? The same could be said for software in a way that, why am I still spending so much money on SaaS licenses if I can just have my agent generate the software I need on demand, tailored to my needs? So will there be a rupture in what we still need to do as a company? Okay. And so, like open source and cloud was commodity for software, maybe the software engineering or your job could become a commodity. So yeah, I know I fed you with kind of multiple ideas. I have no clue where it's landing, but I hope you enjoyed kind of seeing the spectrum of where people are looking at, what are they thinking about. I don't know, to be honest, so probably like this. I don't really want it to take my job. I have, good time at my job. I enjoy my job. If you're interested in learning more, all my talks are on my YouTube channel, so you can find it up on there. And find me on LinkedIn if you want to hear the slides, find the slides or stuff. And please talk to me in the breaks. Tell me your thoughts as deep as you want them to share with me. Thank you very much for listening.